Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, colleagues in the global world. As we start our other in the series, celebrating the Consumer Rights Awareness Month. As always, March is a month when we celebrate the World Consumer Rights Day on 15th March, but we use the month, the whole of it, to do awareness to consumers on various issues. As you'll appreciate, we started the month with expounding, positioning consumers on a just transition to sustainable consumer lives. So today, we are greatly honored to conclude the month with yet another in the series, looking at sustainable lives and bringing in consumers' practical stories. Each one of you, wherever you are, you have got a story, how you have approached sustainability, how you have advocated for sustainability at local government, your household, national. Like I was saying, at our respective levels, we do advocate for sustainable livelihoods in a different way. So our lifestyle impact differently, and then we approach them differently. So today, once again, I would like to start by thanking the Humanist Media Africa, always giving us the opportunity to be on the Humanist TV Africa, where we share a number of aspects with regards to empowering consumers, bringing about their consumer voices, and urging consumers to speak out and up on issues that are affecting them. But looking at what we are going to deliberate on today, it is all about sustainable lifestyles. As consumers, we have a number of challenges, but these challenges do not give us a blank check to behave the way we wish, but we also have responsibilities and rights. So to handle all these and bringing in the consumer's practical stories, I'm joined by Mr. Bernard Bwambale. He will be coming in also to bring in the practical ways using our personal experiences, our personal practices for you to pick up from, and then we see how best we are. So today we are going to roll this program together with Mr. Bernard Bwambale. As usual, I am Chimera Henry at Consent, and we look forward to being with you. To categorize the process, colleagues, wherever you are, I would like to say that most of the aspects that lead to our sustainable lives start in our households, they come to our communities, then they come into national level, and at each level, as consumers, we are one of the building blocks to sustainability. Then we have got the businesses, then we have got the duty bearers. So all of these put together will become a triangle that has a role to play. And in the middle of that triangle, there is the aspect of sustainability lifestyles. As consumers, we consume goods and services. As businesses, they provide us the goods and services, which we would love to say that they need to be sustainable, they need to be of quality, they need to be safe. Now, as duty bearers, ministries, departments, and agencies, governments, they are providing us with policy, regulations, standards as minimum to enable us realize those sustainable lifestyles. Policies come in. So, as the theme is a just transition to sustainable lifestyles, the transition is provided with enabling environment, which is provided by the duty bearers, which is complied and conformed to by the businesses. And that's where at Consent we say we would love to see businesses giving us better businesses, provide us goods and services. Then as consumers, we start using the products that come out of policies, the products that come out of compliance, conforming. And when they get to our household, how do we use those products? How do we use those services? How do we behave in our homes? So we have got those rights. Which rights lead us to basic needs? Which rights tell us to be safe? The right to safety, the right to choose out of the many goods and services. They have the right to information. When you get that information, how do you use it to have a sustainable life? The right to redress in case you are injured, the right to be represented. And that's what consent does when it picks up consumer voices. It takes them to the duty bearers, takes them to the business to represent you as consumers. But the right to consumer education, which now we are going to use our practical stories to see how best you can also strive for a sustainable livelihood or a sustainable lifestyle. Then the right to a healthy environment. As consumers, you have a right to a healthy environment to operate in and live sustainable livelihoods, sustainable lifestyles. That said, with our practical stories, they cannot be concluded without taking into consideration our responsibilities. One of the best aspects to realize sustainable lifestyles, as consumers, we have the responsibility to be critically aware, to think, to plan, do, check, and act, to analyze. Whatever you choose, the basic needs you have, you need to be critically aware. Are they safe? Am I choosing the right choice? Is the product having information? Doesn't it injure my neighbor? Doesn't it injure the environment? Won't it affect us as a community? That is something very important. Consumer responsibilities contribute greatly to our sustainable lifestyles. Consumer action, when you see something good, bad, or good, you recommend it to the other that this is something good. That is a consumer responsibility. When you see something bad and you raise it, you speak up, that is consumer responsibility. It leads to sustainable lifestyles. Going into having environmentally aware, the actions that we're doing, am I burning rubbish into other people's homes in my own homestead? How am I managing my garbage? How am I managing my noise? How am I, if people have gone back home to rest and you put on loud music, loud voices, they won't rest because resting is needed to lead a sustainable life. If I am driving, if I'm walking, or riding anything, and I see a consumer doing physical activity, keep healthy, to lead a good, sustainable life, do I drive into them? Do I impede their activities? If the road is narrow, should I push them off the road? These are consumer responsibility to have social concern for others. Do I litter the environment? If I have hazard material, do I throw it in the water source? This leads us to the consumer responsibility of having environmental awareness. With that, if the environment is endangered by us consumers, then we can't lead sustainably. We have been having floods in Kampala. Majority of the stuff that was floating on top of the water, failing the water going into the drainage, into the channels, being blocked, most of it was due to irresponsible consumer behavior, throwing, littering the environment, blocking the drainage. So we can't have sustainable lives, styles, if we are irresponsible and littering the environment. Lastly, using the consumer responsibilities as a practical consumer story to lead sustainable lifestyles. As consumers, we have the responsibility of solidarity. What affects my neighbor and affect me can affect the entire community. If I'm releasing the dirty water from my household onto the road, onto my neighbor's homestead, into the community water source, as consumers, we need to stand in solidarity and we tell a consumer of their irresponsible act. So all of this put together and acting responsibly, we can facilitate having sustainable lifestyles in any form. We're using public transport. How do we behave in public transport? Do we block all the windows so that people don't get fresh air? Do we take in pollutants that are polluting the air in the public transport? If I'm in a private car, do I all go on behaving wrongly and impeding others? So if we go to the food systems in our households, do we cook foods that we can't finish and then we throw it away? Or do we eat food that leads us to having non-communicable diseases to impede our sustainable lifestyles? So a lot of these, we are going to talk about them, but as a curtain riser, I was just bringing in a few examples, linking them to the duty bearers, linking them to service providers, as in businesses, to be better, to enable us as consumers live sustainable lifestyles. We need the policies, we need the regulations, we need the standard, the enabling environment, and we need the businesses to do their businesses better by complying, conforming to the requirements of providing us with quality, safe, sustainable, responsibly produced goods and services. And with us, the consumers, we adapt, follow the standard operating procedures, follow the labels. As we go out, we need to have plans. We don't just do instinct shoppings. We don't just do instinct and irrational behavior. We need to have social concern. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to our last series in the month of March, when we have a month-long consumer, the World Consumer Rights Awareness Month, in celebration of the World Consumer Rights Day. We need also to apologize to you. We were unable to be with you last Friday. We were grossly committed and we were all spread all over Uganda. So I would like to welcome Bernard to come in and share with us. Bernard, wherever you have been, where I know, but I see, Bernard, you have a lot to share. If I would tell you the carbon footprint of Bernard in the last 10, 14 days is sustainable because he was in services and he was sharing and doing consumer education, consumer information, so that people have sustainable lifestyles. But Bernard was in Accra, where he was looking at nutrition issues, messaging awareness to make sure that we have nutritious food so that policies and us, the consumers, do consume sustainable foods. But after that, he traveled to another city, Cape Town, to join the global world to campaign on the impact of pesticides, agrochemicals impacting us, to join hands to see others who have been impacted. And sustainability with lifestyles tells us to join hands and speak out and even support those that are affected. So he was with the global world on the campaign on pesticides, and he didn't stop to do that where he is. He's also into Nairobi City, where he is trying and joined the global world on the second East African Agroecology Conference, where they're looking at agri-food systems that are sustainable, which is part of building blocks on sustainable lifestyles. So, Bernard, if I look at the acronyms of all those cities, it leads me to A for Accra, C for Cape Town, and N for Nairobi. It reminds me of our colleagues, the Anti-Counterfeit Network.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
anti-counterfeits, all the counterfeits, substandard, are not good for sustainable lifestyles. So, Bernard, I'm always sorry for bringing in a lot of cocktail, but I'll give you the floor. Please share with the consumers and let's empower them to be sustainable and they lead sustainable lifestyles. So, thank you very much, Bernard. The floor is yours.
All right. Now, Mr. Chimera, I think the session is basically done because you've run through everything, and I don't think that we have anything else to add on because now you've exhausted these things. So, but of course, I will try to bring in a little bit of other things. Looking at the subject that we are discussing, it's very critical that I just wanted to first start with reminding our viewers about what sustainable living is all about, just like we had talked about earlier, because now we are finishing the math. I want us to keep note that sustainable living, we are basically looking at those practices that you need to do or that you do to minimize environmental impact. That is very key. What is it that you are doing out there to minimize environmental impact while preserving resources for future generations? Now, if you're a parent, what is it that you're doing that will sustain you now with your children, but also without compromising their ability to be able to meet their needs while you're not there, maybe in the future? I've always given scenarios that, for instance, we are all using the land where we are now. But this land has been used over 1 million years ago. So just imagine if somebody who used it first did not use it sustainably, what is it that you would be using right now? So that should be at the back of our minds when you're talking about sustainable living or sustainable lifestyles. What is it that you're doing now? And how are you doing it to ensure that there is minimal impact on the environment and to ensure that is actually not impeding the future generations to survive on the same principles? Now, when you're talking about sustainable lifestyles, I also wish to remind you that you need to focus on three major dimensions. We need to think about the practice that you're doing now and its where you stay. How is this practice affecting the environment in which you stay, in which you live? Secondly, you look at the social dynamic. How is the practice that you're actually doing affecting your social life, your neighbors, your colleagues around you, your family, your workmates? How is this particular activity or particular interventions or particular practice affecting people around you? Should be the second thought. And then the third thought is about how is what I'm doing affecting the economy? How is it affecting my economic well-being? How is it affecting my incomes or the incomes of those that I associate with or the people that I live with or the people who are neighboring me? Now, when you look at sustainable lifestyles and you bring those three dimensions, then we shall be able to concretely understand the subject matter that we are talking about. Now, for today's session, I am going to use the practical examples using the environmental dynamic, and then I'll try to link the dynamics of environment to social and also economic. And then later on, I'll try to indicate to us what are those effects or the impact of actually unsustainable living. And then I think with that, we shall be able to close. I will be glad to share with you some bit of pictorial presentations just to make sure that you appreciate things that we are talking about. But maybe to also bring on board other things. Every time we are talking about sustainable living, think about issues to do with reducing waste, because if you don't reduce waste, you know what is going to happen. We're going to pile a lot of waste. And when you pile a lot of waste we have learned from the Ugandan case that actually when waste combines and becomes too much and is not dealt with, it can cause death. We have seen in Chitezi, people just collapsed because of waste or garbage mismanagement. So meaning that while we're compiling a lot of waste, and I want to let you know that the waste, for instance, in Chitezi, majority of it was food. It is being contributed to by food waste and food losses. You guys go and cook a lot of food, which you know that you are not going to consume or you cannot be able to finish, but because you pretend to be having some bit of money, you cook excessively too much food that you cannot consume and ends up in the dust bins or in the waste bins, and then defines itself in a garbage pit somewhere, and then it starts piling up. Unfortunately, when this food, even when it was organic, it starts piling and is not dealt with, it's not reused, it's not being put to use, it starts accumulating and producing methane and other greenhouse gases. What that causes, those gases can actually affect the ozone, and so climate change comes in. And that is if you are even lucky, because in the rare cases where we are not lucky, these methane and these other gases can actually erupt and destroy life and people die. Now, these people die and lose their families. The children are left orphans. People are left widowers and widows. And at the end of the day, someone has lost a life that they have been working for a long time. But why are they losing it? Because we did not manage food waste, because we did not manage food loss. Why do you cook food that you cannot eat? Why do you go to a party and serve food that you cannot finish? That is unsustainable, because it is going to end up in a waste bin and it's going to cause trouble. So when you're reasoning about the environmental impact of unsustainable living, think about food waste as one of the scenarios. Now, if you go to the market area, people buy food, excessive food that they know they cannot sell in a period of time. Amidst the challenges, you don't have where to store the food. You don't have, for instance, you don't have the cold rooms. Why are you buying tomatoes that you cannot sell in a period of a week? And you know that from your experience, you've been selling not more than what you can sell. You already know as a business person. So why do you accumulate a lot of tomatoes, which you know that you have never sold in the previous 5 weeks? And then you end up in losses because you are going to lose that waste, that food. If you don't lose it, or if you don't lose it, there's a likelihood that because you don't have cold rooms to keep it, you're going to adopt other unsustainable processes and you start using Mancozeb to preserve the tomato. You are not only causing harm to yourself, but also harm to the people who are going to buy these tomatoes, but also harm to the environment. So at the end of the day, you end up using wrong chemicals to preserve tomatoes. And this, if they are not sold, Mancozeb finds itself in a waste bin mixing with other things. And at the end of the day, you make a cocktail of gases that you can actually not deal with. So we keep on affecting the environmental dynamics. We end up losing animals, we end up losing flora and fauna and all that, just because you are not thinking about the environmental impact of the action that you're actually doing. So that is something to do food waste and food loss. We need to think about, when I serve food on my plate, I must consume it. I must consume it. If I am living in a household of 3 people, I must know how much we can actually consume, and I prepare that, the period, to avoid wasting this food, which was important, and now at some point in 3-4 years, it kills people just because you threw it away. That is something on food waste and loss. But also we need to think about, how are we using other resources like water? Why do you go to a hotel where you're going to reside, and then because you've paid money, you switch on the tap and it takes 1 hour running and there's no one using the water anyway? Remember, this is a natural resource that we must deal with and we must keep safe for other people to use. Mind you, in your homes, some of you who are gifted and you're lucky that God has given you good homes and you have water sources within the house, you see a consumer going to the washroom, opens the tap, runs the tap for 1 hour, but when the neighbors don't have water, why? Why do you spend all that water in cleaning your small body, which can actually be cleaned by about a maximum of 3-4 liters, and for you are using 25 liters or 30 liters to clean just a body? Why? That is unsustainable consumption. It means that you're using too much water that you would even have used for 4 days, and for you are using it just in a mere go. Why? So we are not using resources sustainably, and at the end of the day, we run short of these resources, and our children's children will not find these resources because we are misusing them. I haven't seen people who go to wash and someone is just washing an underwear using a whole basin of water. Why? Why would you do that? Let us also maybe reflect on other resources. We have, for instance, electricity. You find somebody, they are not using a room, but the electricity is on. Now, this is a resource, very unsustainable way of using resources. Why can't we put off the lights that we are not using at a particular time so that we save it for another use? Well, someone would think, oh, this is our money, but the day it will go because you've exhausted the resource where it is coming from. That is when we're going to learn how to actually conserve water, electricity, land, etc. So we have a lot of things. Every time you're talking about consumption, don't think about food alone. Think about food, think about electricity, think about water, think about land, think about everything that you utilize. That is consumption. Away from that, we may need to think about, how do we now deal with the different issues that are coming on board? Maybe let me try to share a little bit my screen so that I can share with you a few perspectives that maybe we could think through. But one of the challenges that we are facing globally now is the challenge of climate change. As we all know, climate change is now a very big issue across the countries. But the question we have always asked ourselves, why is climate change becoming an issue? What is the problem with climate change? Where is it coming from? As a matter of fact, the challenge has been that climate change is resonating from the problems that we have created ourselves. I want to tell you that when you see a lot of heavy rains, the rain comes very short but very heavy, and people die. But the question is, why are the rains becoming terrible the way they are currently? These are the things we need to think about. Because we have, first of all, destroyed the ozone. Secondly, we have dealt wrongly with the environment. So somehow the environment is also complaining. I must say that I think the environment is now complaining. Henry, you need to confirm if you can see my slides. Just confirm if you can.
They have loaded. You can go ahead now.
Okay, all right. So you're able to see the entire screen, or you are seeing something like a window?
I'm seeing the entire screen.
Very good.
I see
Okay.
climate change and food security.
All right, thanks. So, all right, so what I'm trying to show there, let me just maybe put it a little bit in slide mode. I think that one works. Henry, is that okay?
Yes. Yes, please.
Okay. So what I'm just trying to reflect on is that currently we have challenges with climate change. And what this is that people everywhere in the world are complaining about climate change, and we are not reflecting on where the climate change issues are coming from. Unsustainable production of food has led into climate issues, and there are changes because of the unsustainable consumption patterns. We have decided as human beings to cut down the trees, to go and evict the swamps. We are encroaching on the swamps everywhere, which we're actually supporting in minimizing these climate issues. Now, if you go to Kampala, why should people receive rain, which is supposed to be contributing to agriculture and production, and ends up killing humans? Why? Because we have decided to construct our big structures in the swamps where the water was supposed to go and drain. And then that's where we've put the houses. That's where we've put the petrol stations. So that is unsustainable. So because of that unsustainable practice of our people, it has ended up killing people, relocating people, etc. The same climate change we use to produce a lot of food. And so that brings me to the food security aspect. Everybody, everyone deserves to have a meal, to have adequate nutrition, to have adequate food. But what is happening is, because of climate change, we see a lot of shifts to food insecurity because people are not able to produce sufficient amounts of food because of the impact of climate change. And keep remembering that the climate change issues are coming because of unsustainable consumption patterns of our people. So you see that people are going to run into food insecurity, and people are going to start dying of food insecurity. But where is it coming from? Unsustainable consumption patterns. So you see that unsustainable consumption patterns lead to climate change, which results into food insecurity. And now food insecurity will also again contribute to climate change because people will go and start looking for land where they can cultivate something, and they don't see that land. And so they end up encroaching on the preserved areas. And at the end of the day, we have challenges. Now, because of climate change, now we see pesticides coming in play to solve challenges of pests, because the pests have also become notorious because, one, we have destroyed where they are supposed to live. Now they are attacking where human beings are and where the farmlands are. Now, because we have tampered with the climate and the weather patterns, they have also become too resistant, and so they are also looking for survival, and so they come and attack our crops, our animals, so that they also survive. Remember, pests are also living organisms. They have to survive. The mere fact that we have counteracted their sites where they're supposed to be, we have mismanaged the ecosystem, they have become so notorious that they can actually attack all our crops and we don't harvest. And because they have come on board in full blast, notorious as they are, it has attracted our colleagues in the science sector to come up with pesticides, maybe to solve the problem. Unfortunately, most of the pesticides that we have in Africa or on the African continent are highly hazardous. That even makes the situation worse. That as you're dealing with climate change and you want to solve the pests using the pesticides, it is unfortunate that on the African continent, more than half of the pesticides we are using cannot be used in the EU. And so these are highly hazardous. Just the word sounds highly hazardous. So they are hazardous to who? They are hazardous to human beings. They are hazardous to aquatic life. They are hazardous to insects, which are pollinators. They are hazardous to life. Now, if we have these hazardous pesticides, which future are we talking about? This is the issue we are talking about when it comes to sustainable consumption patterns. Now, away from that, we understand that many of us, if not all of us, are now exposed to these highly hazardous pesticides, meaning that we are ceasingly going away from sustainability. So all of us are exposed in different ways, either in the food we eat, or in the water we drink, or in the air drift, or many ways. So we have a lot of exposure to these highly hazardous pesticides, meaning that the more we use them, the more we get exposed to them, the more we run away from the realities of sustainability. I just want to show you some bit of cases here. If you observe these mothers of ours, of course, we know that more than half of the food we consume on the planet is actually cultivated by women. Now look at these 4 photos. If you look at number 1, the photo 1 there, women are just mixing chemicals for spraying, but they are not protected. Their nose, their mouth, their ears, etc., they are closer to the pump right there. So if it is a hot day, as you're exchanging this chemical, it is evaporating. Where does it end? In the nose, in the mouth, in the ears, of this woman. And this is the woman who has to keep producing food for her family over and over again. But she's inhaling the chemical just to ban maybe the pests or whatever it is, forgetting that also they are also contributing to unsustainability, etc. If you look at the second woman there, she's also equally spraying, no protection at all. So first of all, the chemical probably is a highly hazardous chemical, going to the atmosphere, going to the environment, but also entering her body. I want you to observe how she's dressed. In the African setting, especially in the community I come from, this is decent dressing, meaning that this kind of dress can go to the church. Now, when she leaves the field, she's going to wash it. And when she washes it, she's going to wash it in water and pours that water probably in her compound. So you see, whereas the problem was in the garden, but at the end of the day, the cloth is receiving this chemical and she's going to wash it at home. And when she washes it at home, the water is going to be poured anywhere. And now remember, where she's going to pour the wastewater, that's where her children are playing from. That is where, it's a whole mess. Now, the children, we're talking about the future generation. Children were not in the garden, but they are receiving a share through that. And you know how children can play naked and etc. And some of these chemicals keep entering their bodies in that way. If you look at these mothers of ours in all the photos, you realize that they are really spraying, but they're not having protection at all. So it is affecting their health indirectly. Now, 1, remember the 3 principles I talked about. The environment is being affected. And in terms of economics, they will fall sick, go to the hospital, and use all the incomes they have actually saved over the years. And if you look at the social dynamic of it, once they fall sick, will they be able to meet with other women to discuss important things? Will they be able to go to church? Will they be able to go to the market? Will they be able to go to the women groups? Will they be able to go to the leadership, sessions? So you see, then the social life is compromised. So you see that one environmental action can lead or can impede the social, the economic perspectives. If you look at these others, that first photo disappointed me. That gentleman we see with the lady, he is an extension worker, government extension worker, teaching this lady how to spray. But you can imagine how the technical person is entering a field where chemicals are being sprayed. He is not protected, and the person to whom he's giving services is equally not protected. Now, which kind of technical person is this? So you find that now he's getting affected and the lady is getting affected. Both of them have families. And so the shirt of the gentleman and the trouser will be washed by the wife who wasn't there and has a share of that. Pour the water wherever they want to pour it, and maybe people will come and play there. Animals will come and eat the grasses, and things happen that way. And we keep dying. Now we've gone, if you look at these other photographs, you'll realize that these are containers or tins that initially had pesticides. But our mothers, as you know, they always look for containers to keep salt, to keep sugar, to keep tea leaves, etc. So you find that now such photographs are in someone's kitchen. These are pesticide tins, but the tins are now carrying salt, sugar, tea leaves, spices for food, cooking oil, just like you can see there. Now, the tin that was carrying a pesticide is now carrying salt. Now, in South Africa, a few days when I was there, four kids died because they found a chemical on the table. So the chemical looked like salt. So they kept on getting this salt and poured it in their food because they wanted to add salt to the food. And 4 children died. They just died. When the mother realized when she was still in the kitchen, she came back and all the 4 kids were dead, only to realize that she had forgotten the bottle of the pesticide that she had just bought. She'd left it on the table. And these children assumed it was salt, and the children died. So you can see that the lifestyles and the different practices we are doing are contributing to death. Why would these things, for instance, be in the kitchen where somebody's cooking food? So look at this other narration. These are your brothers, these are your uncles, these are your husbands, these are your sons. Look at how heavy the young men are spraying, and look at this magnitude of chemical that is actually entering directly to their faces, to their nose, to their mouth, to their ears, to their skin. Now, socially, I mean, economically, the guy is going to fall sick in the next few years because of this magnitude of pesticide. And when they fall sick, they're going to the hospital, and the only thing is they'll tell you, okay, you have cancer. And of course, that means that you're not going to do a lot of work. You're going to stay home. You're going to get all the money you sold and use it, even add money to, you sell the land you have. So where are the children or the future generation going to stay when you've sold off the land? Where is this gentleman going to have time to network with his colleagues when he's sick, socially impeded? Where is he going to get more money to sustain life when he has done all this mess to himself? Look at how children are being involved in this kind of practice of mixing chemicals and etc. But this is the future generation. And these kids are inhaling as early as 3, 4, 5 years. What do you expect of this child? That they're going to make 70 years? How? Where? So practically a little bit impossible. So this is the future generation that is already having access to poor practices, and this may lead to other challenges. Now, while I was in Cape Town, this is another sad story that I needed also to share with us. So on the 12th of July 2021, there is a particular company that deals with pesticides. And so they came in a particular community and they constructed a warehouse where they were keeping their chemicals. And on the 12th of July, one night, the warehouse caught fire and burnt to ashes. That's just the way you're looking at that. Now, tell me the magnitude of chemicals that erupted from this warehouse. Look at that soot. Look at that smoke. Where did it go? It took a whole month when they were trying to stop the fire. Now, remember, near these warehouses, people are staying right there because this is a community. And so people were affected in the whole night of 12th and spent a whole month. Some people died, other people were suffocated, other people got asthmatic reactions, other people, of course, like children got a lot of asthma, women got miscarriages, etc. Why? Because of not being sensitive on how to handle things. So you see, this is a warehouse of highly hazardous pesticides, but located in a settlement where people stay. So you just imagine this kind of mess. Where will this go? To the environment, to the air, and pollute the air? Where are the birds going to go? Where are the insects, etc.? Now, when you look at the next photo, when this incident happened, this is how it affected the water. So the water changed from its normal color and went into blue. Unfortunately, communities were not informed about the impact of this this burning to the water. So people kept seeing water changing blue, and other people didn't understand why, but also other people did not have other sources of water apart from this. So women kept on coming to fetch water from right here. So imagine this water, it is changing to blue from the chemicals that are mixing from the burning factory. And then at the end of the day, people ate this water, drank this water, used it for cooking, and died. and then had challenges. Others are now incapacitated, etc., just because of one action. Now, if you look at the next photo below there, you'll see some fish flooding, dead. So from this burning of this, we saw the water got contaminated and the fish started dying out. Now, this fish, if you calculated the number of fish that were affected, how much ecosystem have we then destroyed by one single action? Is this water body going to produce more fish? If no, what are the future population, the future generation going to feed on if there is nothing like fish in the water bodies? So there is a lot of things that we need to think about. How are the bottles disposed of after spraying? Women and men just discard the bottles anywhere. And if you look at down there, the women are already picking these bottles, and who knows, they're going to use them for packing juices, water, they're going to, but these were pesticide bottles. So how sustainable is this? How long can people do this? How long can people eat food in the food system of this nature? So some bit of studies were showing that actually women would get those pesticide bottles and use them to carry water, they use them to wash clothing, they use them to, maybe they burn them in the homes, others were staying with them in their bedrooms, others were staying with these bottles in their houses, chemicals in their houses, even in the bedrooms where they are sleeping. So all of this is exposure. So which practice are you doing? And when you do this practice, how is it affecting the health of yourself and your family? How is it affecting your economics? How is it affecting you socially? How is it affecting the environment? Those are questions that I keep asking. Now, this is just a quick one. I wanted to share with you some researches that have shown the impact of these pesticides, highly hazardous pesticides, on women. And maybe the evidence that we have so far is that women who have been exposed to highly hazardous pesticides, they have always experienced longer menstrual cycles. They have experienced missed periods. Some of them just miss. Every month you're supposed to go. This is normal. But then women are going without their menstrual periods. Women who have had chance of actually having menstrual periods, they happen longer. So they take longer. And also we've seen that they even have a 60 to 100% chance of having longer cycles, missed periods, but also intermenstrual bleeding. So these are all effects of the practice of misuse or overusing of highly hazardous pesticides to women. So we're talking about what are we consuming. This study also was showing some bit of women who had more exposure to highly hazardous pesticides became actually infertile as compared to those who are not using the pesticides. We have seen it with abnormal birth. You can see that those who are using pesticides, they also had experiences of abnormal birth. Others had preterm birth. Others had stillbirth. All this associated with misuse of pesticides or exposure to highly hazardous pesticides. We've also seen miscarriages, that some women, because of these wrong practices we're doing, misuse of pesticides, or maybe exposure to highly hazardous pesticides, we see miscarriages happening. Many girls, they are not able to produce their children. They have miscarriages happening. And you can just see from this study that actually the chances increase when one starts misusing pesticides or using highly hazardous pesticides. So the risk of miscarriages increase. So I've tried to put those red colors to show you the magnitude of the challenge. The risk increases. If it is even worse, if a woman is having exposure to highly hazardous pesticides during the first trimester. So all these studies are existing. We've also seen studies on preterm birth that when you have exposure to highly hazardous pesticides, then you have a 10 times risk of actually having a preterm baby. So meaning that before 9 months, for you are giving birth at 5, at 7, at 6, and many of those children, of course, die. We see also there's this review of 94 articles which actually concluded that women who had exposure to highly hazardous pesticides in the fields, in their homes, wherever it is, they have chances of giving birth to children with defects. The head is too big, the head has a lot of water, the spinal cord is not fixed, the child has no urinogenitals, meaning that the private part of the child is maybe located in another side or it is not there, something like that. So, and then others have cardiac problems, meaning that the heart of the baby is not forming, and all those challenges. So we have a lot of those studies. And then, of course, we see that respiratory challenges, that people who have been accessing these highly hazardous pesticides and misuse of chemicals and whatever, they have a higher risk of having respiratory issues. So you are not able to breathe well, you have asthmatic reactions, etc. All this is available. And now for children who have had exposure to these chemicals, we see that one, they have severe headaches, they have very poor cognitive performance, they have worse multitasking. They are not able to multitask when they grow. They have impaired memory. They have impaired learning. They have slow motor and visual processing. So literally, there is a whole damage that this misuse is actually causing to us. And when you look at there's this particular study that was done on boys to see their reproductive health when they're still children and they have access to pesticides. This study was revealing that actually children of that nature, they grow slowly, meaning that they are too short for their height. In simple terms, they get stunted. But also there was an observation that they have altered hormones. So their hormones are altered. And you see that these children now reach in the future and they're not able to produce or have children, and some of them now become impotent, etc. So we see a lot of practices, you're spraying, but where are you spraying? Near a water source, and your colleagues are picking the water. So how is this chemical environmentally friendly, and how is it affecting socially other users? This is what Mr. Chimera was talking about. What about this in our food? Why do we get these chemicals and spread them on our tomatoes and someone is already eating them? The impact of that to health. How much money is this person going to use to treat himself for eating mancozeb, which you, the farmer or the trader, put on a tomato? So these unsustainable practices have ended up having these chemicals even in human bodies, in people's urine. You can see these gentlemen, they have to spray. They don't have protection. They don't have protective gear. And if you look at the first guy there, you see how his face is really tough, to indicate that the chemical has entered in his face. If you look at the second gentleman, you really see that as he sprays, he sweats and the chemical keeps on entering into his skin. So we have quite a lot of things that these were just cases to bring out the one bit of the unsustainability of the food of the food products that we are giving to people. So what I'm just trying to show here is the practice that you are doing as a farmer, as a trader, as a businessman can compromise the ability of other people to actually live longer. I've shown you some cases how women are becoming infertile, how they're not producing their children, just to give you a snapshot of how unsustainable practices can actually be suicidal to society, and how it is impacting the environment, but also you've seen how it can affect the social. You can also see how it affects the economy. So at the end of the day, if we are not careful, then we can lose life, we can lose property, we can lose sovereignty over everything that we do. And at the end of the day, there is nothing that we have as individuals, as families, as population, just because of unsustainability. You want money very fast, but that money you'll have to use it in the hospital. And when you use it in the hospital, you'll be bedridden and you'll never go back to work. So socially, you get affected. So ladies and gentlemen, of course, there's a lot of stuff to share with you, but because the topic of the day was looking at the sustainable lifestyle and giving you the consumer practical stories, and I think you've seen those stories of what I've just been trying to share, but bringing it from the angle of pesticides. I know that maybe another time I can bring it from another angle of overeating or something, but today I just wanted to use one case to elaborate on the theme, on the subject matter. So what do we need to do? I want to call upon governments, first of all, have proper regulations that are enforceable. Make sure that we don't compromise the lives of the people. If it is not allowed to construct in a wetland, then don't construct there. Why do you give licenses or permits for people to construct in a wetland when you know it's damage to the population? Manage waste. Why should waste kill human beings? I mean, they generated it, but why should it kill them? They are paying tax and whatever. Government should actually enforce what they're supposed to do. And for us, the consumers, let us be sensitive. What are we using? How are we using it? And how sensible are we? Are we trying to look at our colleagues? Are we trying to look at what is going to happen? Are we visioning ahead? Are we looking at the future generation? Are we sustainable in nature? When I use water, when I use electricity, when I use food, when I use everything, when I dump waste, what is at the back of my mind? Am I thinking about my neighbor, myself, my children, the children of my children, etc.? We need to reason together. We need to come up to sustainable practices. We can do agroecology, we can do organic agriculture, but the question is, how accessible are they? How affordable are they? How can we be able to meet these sustainable practices? And this should be actually government work, making sure that people have access to sustainable means, they are able to afford them, etc. So we need to do a lot of work as consumers to demand what we are supposed to demand, and to make sure that we become exemplary to do what we are supposed to do. And with that, I think we can have sustainable life, we can live longer, we can even have children and children of our children, and we look at them, we see them. So this business of eating junk, remember, it is unsustainable. You will get sick, spend all the money, die, etc. So let us make sure that, ladies and gentlemen, we cooperate in this whole business of consumer empowerment, consumer sustainability, so that we can be able to be relevant to society that we come from. Mr. Chimera, sorry for taking a very long time, but I hope that can give us perspective over the weekend to reflect on. Thank you so much for listening.
I wish I had a platinum placket or like a platinum cup. I would have awarded you. I would have awarded you starting from brass, going into silver, gold, and then platinum. Bernard, thank you very, very much. You always surprised me. I didn't know that you're going to bring in even a presentation today, and it has well fused in, and it all grounded on responsible production, responsible consumption. When you brought in the Cape Town, South Africa example, where ladies are picking these bottles or containers that have had chemicals, on the other side, you would say that they are behaving responsibly in a circular economy, reusing, recycling. But unfortunately, because of regulations that would lead to only leaving uncontaminated, unhazardous containers in place for the consumers to use, and lead to circularity where you reuse, you recycle, and continuously clean the environment. Unfortunately, the containers that are on the environment are hazardous and they impact the consumers. So, but I liked the discussion. I liked the practical stories. I liked the practical actions. And we need to go that we have got 17 SDGs, but today we have combined a number of them and we have zeroed around responsible production, that chemicals that are being used should be used in a responsible manner. Industry, which is production, should be responsible. Government should bring in laws, policies, regulations, standards that lead to responsible production, and they should be implemented. Then us, the consumers, should do responsible consumption. We shouldn't overuse, misuse. Let's go shopping. Go with your shopping. Let me just bring to a clock and wind up our discussion today with a few things that I still in. Let's look at energy. We are cutting down trees to get charcoal, and we have policies and implement them and invest in them so that there is affordable, accessible, and available alternative energy that is affordable for the consumers, so that they go in for clean energy that is not affecting them in their homes. Let's look at transportation. There is one thing as consumers we have. When we go in to consume fuel, we look at the gauge as they're putting in fuel in the pump. Because in Africa, we don't put in fuel ourselves. They're pump attendants. But there we are very alert. But when you ask consumers, how do you look at the meter of your energy at home, the meter of your water? Oh, I don't care. Why do you care about the vehicle? Why do you care about the fuel? The attention you give the fuel pump attendant, it's the same you should put in your household. You become a role model to your children that you care of the energy, you care about water, you care about the food. Go with your shopping bag. When you are buying, you're doing shoppings for home. Let me just end up with an example I do. I wash my dishes at home and I put it to all my family members, that I harvest the water that we use, or that I use to clean, even if it is soapy, I put it on the side and use it to water my gardens. So whether I have water during the dry season or it is a rainy season, what is biodegradable is used for manure to work out in the kitchen garden, and also use this water to water the gardens, the crops. So that is my small initiative to lead to a sustainable lifestyle, by reusing the water from my kitchen and reusing whatever I get, which is biodegradable, from the sink, whatever I'm using to clean, so that I water my home and everything. So here, and I would like to thank Oris Dennis. You bring in many interesting stuff. A river died overnight in Zambia after an acidic waste spill. Just imagine how many millions were depending on this river. That is where regulation, bring in responsible production, so that we have responsible consumption. So all the consumers in this area were affected. So let's act local and impact globally. So sustainable consumer lifestyles are brought in by just transition. But the just transition is not only for governments. Duty bearers, as in government, ministries, departments, and agencies, have a role to play. Businesses, you need to do better business so that you provide consumers with sustainable goods and services, so that the consumers live a sustainable lifestyles. So it was a great honor having you tonight, having you this afternoon, and having you this morning. Always a pleasure and grateful to Humanist Media Africa, and to our producer, Dennis Bongoli in Entebbe, and to all your colleagues in the respective African capitals that form the continent of Africa, the wealthiest continent on the global world. We need to use our natural resources sustainably. We need to use our human resource sustainably. We need to use our endowments, as in many aspects. We need to use our youthful population sustainably, by empowering them, by enabling them to be innovative, by enabling them to be productive, and do enough production that is sustainable and resilient to build Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow consumers, I thank you, and I wish you the end of March as a month of consumer rights awareness. Let's continue transiting in a just transition for sustainable lifestyles. As consumers, we are the foundation for sustainability, and we have to play our role. Thank you very much for being with us, and I wish you a superb weekend. Yes.